Now, I certainly know that I would want to be on the left-hand side of this page, far further than on the right-hand side of this page, and yet you look at the statistics and it simply says 80% of people are either just about getting by or struggling, and only 20% are growing their businesses. But there is a beauty to this, and there's a beauty that we should all take in consideration. I think it's the first golden nugget of perhaps today's webinar, is stop following the competition. Stop looking at the local competition and thinking, oh, they've got a new website, perhaps we ought to have a new website, or they've started to do radio advertising, perhaps we ought to do radio advertising. Because there's a good chance that if we are driven or conscious of other people in the industry and what they're doing, that there's a damn good chance that they're in the 80% that aren't doing that well altogether, and we're simply following them to maintain mediocrity. So the first lesson I would want to offer within this webinar is stop looking to the external influence and saying, well, we need to follow them and do more of what they're doing, and be able to make sure that you're doing exactly what you should be doing, almost standing out from the crowd, almost some differentiation from you and from whatever else it is that you're doing in order to stand out and become that 15%, that 4%, that 1%. However, to go a little bit further, we need to be able to understand that to do that, we've got to stop treating customers as customers and start going back to treating every person as an individual. All customers are not the same, and yet the amount of times I'll ask clients or business owners with regards to, so who is your ideal target market? Oh no, we could sell to anybody. I said, well that's interesting. I says, but who's the ideal target market? Well, we'd like people who are prepared to spend a lot of money with us. And that's just ridiculous. If we don't understand who we're selling to, then the simple answer is we don't know who we don't want to sell to. And the biggest thing I've found in my business is that the most effective thing that we can possibly do is to say no to some of the people that want to buy from us. By understanding as to who we don't want to sell to, it gives us a lot more opportunities to be able to concentrate all our efforts on being able to make sure that we make the right sales to the right people. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through the next 2 or 3 slides and talk a little bit about each one and why that's relevant to you, and then we'll look at how an example of how that's worked in the real life. So first of all, grade your list. Every year I go through our current database of prospects, of inquiries, of customers, of past customers, of people that are currently with us or have been with us and left, and I grade them. Now I might quickly add, it's not the best thing to tell your list that you're going to grade them and give them the grade that you've given them. It's not best to share this information. But every year we grade our list A, B, C, and D. Now, you might automatically be thinking that a grade A client is the one that spends the most, and it's simply not. Okay, so first of all, a grade A customer is your most profitable customer. I look at our list and I determine as to not necessarily who's spending the most, but who's buying what we want to sell at the point that we want to sell it, at the price that we want to sell it, who are the customers that simply buy what we sell in the manner that we sell it, without any alterations or deviations. These are my scale customers. These are the people that have become fans of the business, that are happy to recommend and refer and come back time and time and time again and bring their family and friends with them. That's an A-grade customer. And in my business, we've probably got about a dozen A-grade customers. However, a B-grade customer could potentially spend more than an A-grade customer. They spend much and often, but they do like that TLC approach. They do like a more bespoke element. They like the opportunity for a little bit of individuality, and we have to be able to take some time out to manage these clients in order for them to be able to spend more with us. So that's a B grade. They might spend more than an A, but in actual fact they take up more time than an A, and therefore it becomes resource driven, which is why they're an A grade customer. A C grade customer is simply bread and butter cash. They might not spend a lot with you, but I often say that they're the ones that turn the lights on every morning. And if you ever find there is an importance to a C-grade customer, if you ever find your back up against the wall, or you're a little bit overstretched, or you need a quick small but a quick cash injection into the business. And if you put an offer out or some form of experimental trial with a C-grade customer, these are the ones that will come back happily and spend a little bit of money with you as and when you require it to be done so, just to be able to put a little bit of cash in the bank. So there's my A's, there's my B's, there's my C's. You might argue, what on earth is a D? Well, simply, your D is your Mood Hoover. It doesn't really matter as to how much money the client spends with you. The trouble is with the Mood Hoover is the fact that they absorb your energy. They're the type of person that whenever the email comes in or the phone rings and you see who it is and you think, oh, really? Have I really got to deal with that? Surely they can, why don't they just email me instead of, why haven't they just bought from me? And I'm sure if you think long and hard, you can associate with somebody in your list that is constantly draining you and your energy or your enthusiasm. And the risk is that unless we understand and identify as to who these people are, then we're at risk of our marketing working and attracting more people like them. Now, this is two detrimental problems here. First of all, it starts to absorb your energy and your enthusiasm for continuing to doing what you're doing. But it also starts to detract our A's and our B's, because they start to see that that's the type of clientele that you are introducing to the business, and that's not where they are and that's not who they are. So not only does it take your time and energy away, and therefore you're not quite as enthused to be able to work in the business and support the A's and B clients, the one that phones directly after this D-grade customer, but in actual fact it starts to dissuade them from wanting to do business with you also. So that's what we do, and every year we have a bit of a cull of our list, and we determine as to who do we want to work with and how best are we going to be able to work with those people, and who are the types of clients that we don't really want to work with anymore because they don't get who we are and they don't buy into the ethics and morals of who we are as a business and where we're going. And I think it's massively important if we're going to try and scale a business and see some significant growth to go from the 15% club to the 4% clubs to the 1% club, that we understand it exclusively as to how to be able to attract more A's and detract more D's. So in the closing points of this physical presentation, this webinar, and before I start to take questions from you, I'm just going to quickly run through how we do that and the effect it has for us. And I'm going to start by dissecting the cell. I hope you can see what I've done there. I'm not some biology teacher, but we formulate our sales process, then you can understand as to how we attract the A's and detract the D's. And what we do is we've got this 9-figure grid, and we use this grid for all of our external communications. We use it in all of our email copy, we use it in all of our hard sales copy, we use it in our video scripting. This is the 9-figure grid that we use in order to be able to have currently a 76% conversion rate from inquiry to customer into our A and B grade list. You've probably heard the expression start with the end in mind. So that's where we're going to start. I always think with regards to, by the time I've ended this communication, what emotion, which is why I've got a heart in the bottom right hand corner there, but what emotion do I want to invoke within the person I'm communicating with that creates my call to action, the CTA there, that creates my call to action as the most logical things to do, that they actually love what I've said to them so much that it becomes logical things to do to respond to that by going to the next stage in the process. It actually becomes illogical not to do so. So I want to find the emotional state that I want people to be in, and I know that everything that I do in the next 8 grids has got to be able to support that emotional state. Once I've done that, I can go back to the start of the communication, and I often start by telling a story. It seems to be that we've forgotten the importance of storytelling. We've moved on to this whole sales patter of let me tell you all about the product and the service and who we are, and we've forgotten the importance of the impact of the story and people by people. You know, when I was a young kid, we always learned through stories. It's only when we became an adult that we seem to have missed that. And yet if we can get people to understand the ethics, the morals, the intent, the business purpose, as opposed to the product. And again, you've only got to look at people like Apple. People buy Apple because of who Apple is, not because of the product on the shelf at the time. They've got a story and people buy into the story. So what's your story, and how does your story create an emotion that people can start becoming attracted to and respond to? The next thing we do is a little bit of NLP trickery, really. So we look at the grid and we divide it into time, and we say, how long is it going to take the customer to go from the start of this communication to the call to action? And let's assume that that is perhaps an hour, maybe a webinar. It's going to take 55 minutes. So we will look at the first 2/3 of that, the first 6 parts on the grid, and we make sure that all the communication that we have, that 3 times as much time is spent talking about you and your problem and your solution and your business and your journey than we do talking about I and me and my business. There's nothing worse than listening to somebody and all they do is continue to talk about me and how good we are and our business and our products and our services, because at the moment the person hasn't got a good enough rapport with you to buy into that emotion in the same way that you're trying to sell it. So we make sure that all of our concentration is about you and your business and your journey and your growth and your requirements, and we centre the whole conversation about the person or persons that we're communicating with. We then move into we language, but in we language we also start to talk in future tense. So we talk about having delivered the product or service and the solutions to that. We start talking in future tense as if the person's already bought it and what they're starting to see as a result of that. It's as if the deal's already been done and the benefits that they're receiving as a result of having taken this action. And then a quick reminder that in order to be able to get to that place, they need to respond by following our call to action. And it's this grid that we've embedded within our sales process or our onboarding process, our engagement process with prospects, that have enabled us to be able to, one, determine as to who they are, to learn a little bit more about them and their business, to determine and ascertain as to whether they're likely to be an A, a B, a C or a D, and then through that as to whether we're going to likely to want to do business with them or not, and whether we're going to break this cycle and say, well, thanks very much, it's been a nice conversation, I hope you've got something from it, best of luck to you in the future, perhaps we'd like to signpost you to somebody else more appropriate, or as to whether we think that they're the relevant and right people to have within our list and our business, the people that we want to be able to do business with, to be able to help to get them from that 15 to that 4 to that 1%. I hope in a nutshell, I know I've rapided on at quite a rapid rate of knots there, but I hope that's given you some indication with regards to a different way of being able to do business in order to be able to ascertain and determine as to, one, the quality of person you're bringing into the business and as to whether that's going to be of relevance or not, and two, how to be able to attract them. In summary, before I take questions, I just want to quickly throw a thought to you that there is a big concern in many businesses, or I certainly have a concern with many businesses that I work with at present, that there's almost some silo type mentality where we see a sales team that are responsible for attracting and bringing in new business, and they've got some sales targets and conversion targets. We've got a marketing team that's responsible for trying to attract the right type of business and put the feelers out there to be able to build the brand in order for the sales to come in. And yet, unless we actually understand from the finance department as to the impact that those sales are having on the bottom line, we don't know as to whether we're attracting the right type of people or we're just busy in the busyness of business. And I would certainly want us to think that if we've got some joined up thinking, that we actually understand as to who we want to attract and how we need to attract them in order to be able to have the best impact on our bottom line and have that as a driving factor, as opposed to saying, well, we stack them high and sell them cheap. I certainly know that having implemented this within our own business, I spent nearly 7 months collecting this grid and testing it with our sales process team, and then to ensure that we've got a marketeer, a salesperson and a finance account manager that work within a team and look after a core of clients, that collectively they understand the impact that each other is having on the bottom line and the growth of our business. And that's enabled us to be able to have an average client retention of about 4.5 to 5 years and an average client spend that's over tripled in the last 12 months. I hope that's been of interest to you. I'd be more than happy, Natasha, if you want to come in if people have got any questions.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Jay. We've got a few questions. Whoa, they're flowing in. Okay, so the first one was quite at the beginning of your presentation, and Ryan is asking, how do we validate that Apple are recession proof?
Great question. And I think the moment that somebody becomes recession proof, as soon as they start to think that they're recession proof, sadly the other side of the brain, the limbic brain, starts to work, and then we start to talk about complacency, because once you've got to the top there's nowhere else to go other than to fall back to the bottom again. With regards to my reference to recession proof and Apple and the likes, is once you've got a brand and people are buying a brand rather than a product, then until you do brand damage, then you can still be able to bring out a whole series of products or services, and the business will still continue to grow and grow and grow whilst people still buy the brand. And I think that's why there's a big difference between a successful business and a successful brand. If we use the Apple scenario, the iPhone 6 is invariably not the best phone on the market for that price point and for its service and availability, and yet it's outsold every other alternative at least 4-1, because people are buying a brand and what they want the next best thing from them. It's almost become a fashion statement as opposed to actually the quality of product doesn't have to be as good as the competitions to still outsell the competition.
Okay. This is a really good one as well. What's the best way to educate an extremely hungry and passionate salesperson who is wasting so much time with mood hoovers and trying to grab every order without damaging their motivation?
Brilliant. There was a study done by Harvard University about 2 years ago now that I think is really quite relevant, certainly within the sales industry, especially if there's a commission structure based around sales. And the study went on to say that if it's quite cleverly done, because they've studied both European, American and Eastern European countries, and they've taken this study over a 4-year period and determined that if somebody has got a physical job, i.e. pick that up and put it down, pick that up and put it down, then the primary motivating factor is always money. And if you want them to pick it up better or more carefully or put it down more precisely, if you need them to do it faster or quicker or more effectively or bigger objects, then the motivator is cash. However, as soon as you're asking somebody to think and use more of a mental capacity than a physical capacity, there's a lovely phrase within the report, and I'd love to get to know as to exactly what they mean by it, but it says, as soon as the money becomes enough, then the cash itself ceases to become the most motivating factor. It becomes more a case of recognition or attribution or contributions to the overall business success that becomes more of a deciding factor. So when it comes to somebody that's got a highly motivated salesperson, but there seems to be grasping at everything, they're almost going for the low-hanging fruit because it's an easy sell as opposed to the most productive or effective sell, then perhaps it's a one-to-one conversation to determine as to what are their motivators, and to look at a different way of incentivizing them to be able to trial a different market, or to at least take away the fear factor of moving away from what they are comfortable at present. The fear is a big thing in business. The fear of failure is enough to be able to stop us from trying to create change. But the fear of success about, well, what happens if this became too big and I wouldn't know how to cope? What happens if I lost the sale because I couldn't contribute enough to it, or that there was too much stuff coming? The fear of success is actually just as true as the fear of failure. If we could give some assurances that to make a different decision wouldn't have a detrimental impact on them and their performance whilst we've trialled something new, whilst trying to find their motivators and determine as to whether we can influence their motivators, that might have a better impact than to try and say, well, I want you to stop doing that and trying to do this instead.
Okay, thank you, Jay. We've got quite a few coming in. What do you do with highly profitable customers who are very undesirable in their behaviour to you?
I'm going to share a very quick story about my accountant. For those people who know me, I've got a fabulous relationship with my accountant. But I pray every year that I've been a good enough customer to remain a customer. Because I know that my accountancy practice had a cull about 4 years ago and got rid of about a third of their current customers. Now, it's all about education. It's all about, if they're not doing, if they are spending lots, but they aren't a fan, they aren't buying the way that we want to sell to them, then they are a B grade customer. And in order for us to be able to get a B grade to become an A grade, to become someone that buys from us in the manner that we want to sell what we want to sell, we need to educate them as to, one, why we're doing what we're doing, and to get them to buy into our mission statements and to get them to buy into the whole purpose of why we are, but also to help them understand as to how that then contributes and supports them. We've got to have a tie between our purpose and what we're trying to achieve, and how by us achieving that, it's a massive relevance and support to them in their business. You see, I mean, in my coaching practice, our mission statement is to be able to have donated £10 million to a registered charity in the UK. And all of our clients understand that by working with us, they're also helping us to make that financial contributions to a registered charity. And because they understand that we have a purpose beyond profit, the people who I'm working with buy into that and are happy to be able to remain on our backs and understand that a contribution of what they're making on a day-to-day basis of every sale that we make is actually supporting something beyond the pockets and profits of the shareholders.
Okay. If the business that I sell is still in early stage of development and there is still a lack of trust in our brand and services, what would be the best way to attract new business?
Sorry, just ask the question again.
If the business that I sell is still in the early stage of development and there's still a lack of trust in our brand and services, what would be the best way to attract new business?
We trialled this in January last year. We were introducing a new series of services into a market that we weren't that familiar with, but wanted to be able to take over a significant part of market share quite quickly, without any real knowledge, without the industry knowing who we are or why we were able to support that industry. And what we did is we went to the first half a dozen people who we targeted, who we wanted to work with. We'd done a little bit of research to determine and found that they were predominantly early adopters of new technology or early adopters of trial of new stuff anyway, from historical data that we've been able to get from either LinkedIn or having looked at customer performance to determine as to who are the early adopters. And we went to them and said, this is who we are, this is what we want to do for you, and we want to do it as a beta test, therefore can we do it at no cost? Can we simply allow you to become our guinea pig, because we'd like to provide a service or support or an answer to your potential problem that's going to cost you nothing at all. We're just testing just testing the market. We specifically went to early adopters to be able to do this because we knew that there was a more likelihood of them liking that idea, and 5 of the 6 agreed to it. We went away and we sourced what their current problem was. We sourced the solution for them, and we provided the solutions to them at no cost to them whatsoever, and then said, if you'd had to pay for that, we then left it 2 or 3 weeks in order for that solutions to become embedded within the business and for them to start to see the results. We then went back to them and said, is it working for you? How good is it? Do we need to tweak it at all? And when 5 of them came back and said, it's just phenomenal, what you've done for us and our business is just immense, we said, brilliant. I've now got 5 case studies, I've now got 5 testimonials of people in the industry who do trust us, and in order for us not to be able to charge the next 5 people, perhaps you'd be kind enough to be able to recommend us to 5 of your colleagues or friends. Now, we didn't say 5 of, one person each. We said, can you recommend us to 5 more people? Well, so far in the last 15 months, one of those early adopters that took on that solution has passed us 163 A-grade referrals.
Wow.
But we did it by going to the market and saying, we want to learn from you. We know that you're early adopters. Can we work with you to be able to provide the solution? At our cost, we will absorb the development costs in order to be able to make sure that we get this right before we then put it out to the market. And you can be seen as the founders of this within the sector that we want to work with. It's about not being greedy. It's about being willing to be able to work with people as opposed to always look for the quick profit as opposed to being in it for the long game.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions.
Sure.
Richard is asking, why can't a supplier collaborate with a client and explain that you wish to move them from B to A with tact?
Richard, it's a lovely question. Thanks for asking. Again, I'm going to refer to something that's happened in the last 6 or 7 weeks, really. We have a very, very, very stringent and very concise measure process with regards to where we get our new business from. I'm a firm believer what gets measured gets managed, and in order for me to be able to manage the business, I've got to be able to measure every element of it. So we're very specific with regards to how we measure and what happens and how we win new business. We have a very active referral program. A very lucrative referral program for people that do well by us, and I keep a very close eye on that. And something that came through recently was we'd been recommended to a company in mid-Wales who I'd never heard of before. We'd not done any marketing to. It's not geographically in our remits to market to at present. That's turned into very quickly a very high B-grade customer. Yes, there's a lot of bespoke elements to it, but they're paying through the nose for it, and they're more than happy to do so. And it's a good relationship to have. So during the onboarding process, we were very specific to determine as to how they'd come and found us, because nowhere in our measurement train had we accounted for where they'd come from. It was a bit of an anomaly. And he said, well, it's come from my supplier, my accountant has recommended you. And it turns out that their accountant is in a partnership agreement with my accountant. So I went back to my accountant and I said, I understand that you've made some recommendations to some fellow colleagues that have subsequently put the word out. It seems to be going extremely well. Can you advise as to what you've done that for, how you've done that, why you've done that? We haven't asked you to do so. And she said, the bigger you get, the more you need our services. It's in my interest to be able to make sure that you grow quickly, and therefore we're making recommendations of other people that we know that you could help and benefit and support in order for them to grow, because the more they grow, the more they spend with you, the more you spend, the more you grow, the more tax advice you need, the more you come back to us. And we've actually been recommended by a supplier to a customer that we weren't even targeting. Perhaps if we had a good relationship with everyone within our supply chain, both above us and below us, who we supply to and who we buy from, and that they all understand the purpose that we're playing and the role that we play in the whole business cycle, then we could start to be able to help other people understand as to who we're trying to attract and who not to pass our way because they're a C or a D grade client.
Okay, we've got one last one. Do you think that commission-based incentive model is the best to retain a good salesman?
No. As alluded to very previously with the Harvard thing, yes, I understand that money makes the world go round in a commercial environment. I'm firmly against cap sales commissions. I don't believe that there should ever be a cap on commission or on bonus structure. I believe that the right way to be able to get the best out of any sales team is to be able to get them to buy into the business. I don't think predominantly that that people are there just because it's a salary. I've got a team of 3 dedicated full-time sales staff at present, and all 3 of them are on a completely different commission structure based on their individual requirements. one of them is getting married at the end of this year, and his incentive is he wants to earn as much money as he possibly can in a short period of time in order to be able to pay for the wedding of his dreams with his fiancée. So his KPIs over the next 6 months are about quick return on investment and getting the quick cash in. So his KPIs are around attracting some low B, high C grade customers. Now, we acknowledge the fact that he's not bringing in a vast amount of money, but to the same extent he's bringing in lots of little clients that will keep us, keep the wolf away from the door on a rainy day type stuff, and he's incentivized to do so because he knows that we're going to support him with, one, some additional time off so we can get married, but two, that he's going to be able to make the right amount of money in the short period of time that he needs to be able to do so. I know that when he gets back from his honeymoon, he's not going to say, do you know what, I've been offered a better job and I'm moving somewhere else. Meanwhile, my most junior member of the sales team at the moment, I was somewhat having to start to performance manage him in the beginning of this year because he was constantly late into work. He'd stay late, but he didn't turn up on time, and I was getting quite concerned about it. And it turns out that he doesn't drive. He was coming on the bus into the town and then a taxi out to our offices. We live in the suburbs. And he was having problems with public transport. So his incentive is hit your targets and I'll pay for your driving lessons. Help hit the business targets and I'll buy you a car. Now, you see, it's not about the car. The car's going to cost me 150, 160 quid a month on some lease agreement while ever he's working for me. It's not about the cash. I'm giving him his freedom because at the moment he's reliant on public transport. To have freedoms, to know that his boss has provided him with a car key and the means to be able to go where he wants, when he wants. Now, admittedly, it means that he'll have to blink him or turn up to work on time. But to incentivise him beyond cash, I know full well that I won't need to give him a bonus for the next 18 months. I won't need to have to worry about his payment structure. I won't have to worry about his timings and his KPIs. I know that I've bought him because I understand him. Now, I come from a military background. I served for 14 years in the army. My commanding officer managed 812 men, and he knew every single one of them by name. If you were married, he knew their wives' names, and he knew a little bit about you, enough that when you had a conversation with him, you felt like he knew you. And I don't believe that any business is too big that we can't actually get to know personally, not necessarily have a personal relationship with, but gets to know a little bit about the person rather than the role that they play, sufficient to understand as to what is their motivational drivers, that we can't structure something that is more personal to them and more relevant to them than simply turn around and saying, I'll give you some more cash.
That brings all of our questions to an end, Jay. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Well, I just wanted to make an offer. I hope you've enjoyed today's webinar. I've been most grateful for the fact that I've been invited to be able to come and join you this morning. But if anyone would want to be able to talk to me further with regards to either your particular circumstance or how best I might be able to either answer any questions that you haven't thought to ask today, if you'd like to simply email mystory@mytruenorth.biz. That's mystory@mytruenorth.biz. I'd be happy to give you a personal reply to whichever email that you send or question you ask.
Brilliant. Thank you so much to you today, Jay, and thank you for everyone for attending. Please be sure to check out our website for upcoming events, and I wish you all a good day. Thank you. Bye.
My pleasure. Thank you.